Although Tucker was pretty much a nobody in this crowd, his sister had a wonderful reputation and nobody wanted to say anything that would upset her. As for Kevin, everybody had heard the nasty things Jason Jones had been saying about him. Grandpa Steele had been watching all of this from his comfortable chair. As he looked at Kevin, he seemed to be in deep thought. It was as if he could see a little bit of his younger self in Kevin's appearance. When he arrived in Chicago years ago, Norman had no money and no status, but he made up for it with guts and determination. So Grandpa Steele wanted to see what Kevin would do to turn the situation around. Now that you mention it, I'm kind of curious. Who exactly is this sister of yours? Kevin sneered. Never mind. I'll just show you her gift and you'll know what kind of person she is. Tucker replied as he walked to the table and picked up an exquisite package. When he was finished speaking, Tucker opened the package and pulled out a beautiful set of Rolex watches. At first glance, it must have been worth a fortune. Not bad. But you didn't pay for them yourself, Kevin said with a mocking smile. Since I'm here to celebrate Norman Steele's birthday, I certainly wouldn't come empty-handed. Unlike some people. Tucker glared at Kevin and it was obvious he was talking about him. Then he took another present from the table and opened it. This is an authentic bust of the Greek god Apollo from over 300 years ago. It's to remind everyone of your eternal reputation, Mr. Steele, Tucker said proudly. The guests were very impressed by this gift, which must have been worth $100,000. There was no way that Kevin could do better. And it was sure to help his sister get her foot in the door with the Steele's family business. Even Dalton walked over to take a closer look. He definitely appreciated the craftsmanship. As Kevin watched, his smile grew wider and wider. What are you laughing at, you jackass? Did you bring anything that's worth this much? Tucker said with disdain. I'm laughing at you, Tucker. You don't even know how to choose a present, Kevin said as he slowly shook his head. Did you actually bring this thing to celebrate Mr. Steele's birthday? You'll be lucky if he doesn't smash it over your head. Kevin, is there something we should know? Dalton asked suspiciously. Kevin nodded his head but didn't answer Dalton's question right away. Instead, he said to Tucker, Let me ask you, how much did you spend on this thing? $110,000, Tucker said as he proudly lifted his chin. If this were a real 18th century bust of Apollo, that would be a fair price. Unfortunately, the box is probably worth about as much as your gift, Kevin said confidently. Kevin, don't talk nonsense, Millie said as she worriedly looked over at Norman Steele. What do you mean? Are you saying that this is a fake? Tucker said as he clenched his fists. Kevin smiled and looked at Tucker. Then he asked, Do you know where a bust like this would come from? Kevin, do you know how to appraise antiques? Dalton asked in surprise. Kevin nodded his head in response to Dalton's question. The original bust is actually in Italy, he explained. That's the first reason I know it's not authentic, Kevin continued. But also, if you look closely, it's not even really marble. It's probably a plaster cast that was coated in urethane and painted to look like marble. It would make a nice bathroom decoration, but it's certainly not a gift worthy of a distinguished person like Mr. Steele. You're talking nonsense. How can you be so sure this is a fake? Tucker roared loudly. He had actually bought it from one of his uncles. Tucker just couldn't believe that his uncle would lie to him and put him in an embarrassing position like this. Believe what you want, Kevin said smugly. He was tired of dealing with Tucker's nonsense. Kevin picked up the bust and dropped it lightly on the table. As everyone watched, the so-called marble bust broke apart into a dusty pile of plaster. The crowd gasped when they saw this. They'd all thought it was a genuine marble bust of Apollo from the 1700s. They were obviously wrong. I'm sorry I had to do that, Kevin said, but Mr. Steele had to find out sooner or later. Then he turned to look at Dalton. After thinking for a moment, Kevin said, The next thing I have to say may seem a little impolite. Are you sure you want me to say it? Before Dalton could answer, Grandpa Steele said, Go ahead, young man, just say it. I'm too old to care what people think. Thank you. That's very wise. I hate to have to say this, though. Kevin answered impolitely. If you remember your mythology, Kevin explained, King Midas insulted the god Apollo and his ears were transformed into donkey ears as punishment. So there could actually be another meaning to this gift, especially for someone as wealthy as Mr. Steele. After saying this, Kevin turned around and looked Tucker in the eyes. Aside from the fact that this thing is fake, I have to ask you, why would you offer something like this on Grandpa Steele's birthday? When he heard this, Tucker's face turned pale, and sweat started to break out on his forehead. The members of the Steele family who were in the room were also very upset to hear this and turned to glare at Tucker. Tucker was desperate, and the only solution he could think of was to turn his attention back on Kevin. He pointed at him and shouted, "Even if what you said is true, my intention was to help celebrate Mr. Steele's birthday." "But what about you?" he continued. "Did you come here empty-handed?" Then Tucker sneered and yelled, "If it wasn't for your wife, I'll bet you wouldn't even know that today is his birthday. Am I right?" "Hey, who told you I didn't bring any gifts?" Kevin laughed as he looked at Tucker mockingly. On the way to Dalton's mansion, he'd already sent a message to Miss Wilson. He figured that by now someone should be showing up with his gifts. "How can a lowlife like you afford to offer anything interesting? Did you stop off at the gift shop at the mall on the way here?" Tucker said with a sneer. "That would still be better than what you brought," Kevin said calmly. "Then why don't you show everyone right now? What kind of trash did you bring?" Tucker said desperately. If there hadn't been such a big crowd, he really would have taken a swing at Kevin right now. "Don't worry, we'll soon see," Kevin said as he crossed his arms in front of his chest. He wasn't worried at all. "Kevin, what are you doing? We didn't bring anything," Lily whispered to him anxiously. They had just come out of the hospital and only found out a little while ago that today was Norman Sale's birthday. So where did Kevin find a present so quickly? "Oh, someone's sending it over? Did you order takeout for him?" The more Tucker spoke, the more scornfully he looked at Kevin. A lot of them laughed when Tucker said this. They believed Jason's lies and didn't expect much of anything from Kevin. What could he possibly have gotten for Grandpa Steele? Just then there was a lot of commotion at the mansion's entrance and someone announced, "Director Lexi Belmont of Williams Media has arrived." Everyone looked over when they heard that. After all, Williams Media was extremely well respected in Chicago. They all wished that they had a business relationship with the company. Everyone watched Lexi walk into the room. She was wearing a very professional outfit and she was carrying a large bright red gift bag in her hand as she walked quickly toward the head table. "Lexi, what are you doing here? Did you forget to tell me something? Why didn't you just give me a call?" Tucker welcomed his sister warmly. He was very puzzled by all of this. He was originally supposed to come here today with Lexi, but she had something to do at the last minute at work. So she asked him to pick up some gifts and give them to Mr. Steele on her behalf. He certainly didn't expect her to show up right now. But to everyone's surprise, Lexi didn't even look at Tucker. After placing the huge bag on the table, she quickly walked over to Kevin. "I'm sorry I'm late, Mr. Williams. I've brought the gifts that you asked me to prepare," Lexi said anxiously, as if she was afraid that Kevin would get angry. "That's fine. Actually, you're right on time," Kevin said with a smile. The crowd was shocked to see this. Had she just walked over and apologized to Kevin? Some of them thought they must have heard wrong. If Tucker had brought gifts for Grandpa Steele on her behalf, what was she doing bringing something for Kevin to offer him? But now they clearly heard Lexi call Kevin, the outcast of the Jones family, Mr. Williams. None of this made any sense. But Lexi ignored all the whispering. After hearing that Kevin wasn't upset with her, she gradually relaxed. "Thank you, Mr. Williams," she said graciously. "No need to thank me. I appreciate your help and I'm glad that you got here so quickly," Kevin said casually. "Oh, the pleasure was all mine, Mr. Williams," Lexi replied. Lily felt her legs start to get weak when she heard this. Why was someone from the upper management of Williams Media being so respectful to Kevin? Tucker also stared in disbelief. His sister had worked her way up the corporate ladder and it was only with her help that he had been able to get where he was today. But he had never seen his older sister being so courteous and respectful to anyone. Suddenly, Kevin asked slowly, "So, Tucker's your brother?" Yes, he is, Lexi answered politely. That's nice. Your brother may not be very competent, but he sure knows how to bully someone, Kevin said seriously. Hearing this, Lexi was suddenly very embarrassed and she stumbled to reply, I'm so sorry, Mr. Williams. It's all my fault. This made Tucker angry. Sis, why are you apologizing to this scumbag? He's just that useless son-in-law everyone's talking about from the Jones family. Before he could say another word, she slapped him in the face. Lexi, why did you hit me? Tucker said as he covered his face with his palm. He was confused at her reaction. What have you done? She asked him sharply. I really let you get away with too much. How dare you insult Mr. Williams? She had known Kevin for a long time, but he had never said anything like this to her. That's why she didn't even bother to ask Kevin what had happened. Lexi knew right away that it was her brother who had been causing trouble, as usual. But sis, Kevin's just a useless freeloader, Tucker tried to explain. Shut up right now, Lexi yelled as she slapped Tucker on the other cheek. I want you to apologize to him immediately. Tucker hesitated. He had no idea why his sister was talking to him like this. Right now, apologize, Lexi said as she pushed Tucker over to stand in front of Kevin. He looked down at the floor and took a deep breath before he finally mumbled, I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, that was wrong of me. Please forgive me. Everyone started shaking their heads. What a change in Tucker's behavior from just a few minutes ago. Kevin glared at Tucker. He was really sorry to have such an unpleasant scene in front of Grandpa Steele at his birthday party. But Tucker had really asked for it. Suddenly, Kevin's phone rang. He looked at the unfamiliar caller ID and frowned as he picked up the phone. Hello? May I ask who's calling? Mitchell Cook, President Wright, Emo, and Gilbert were all taken hostage by the Williams family. I was also injured, Drake said anxiously. Drake now understood how powerful Thomas Williams was. Kevin's uncle was someone that he couldn't touch, so if he wanted to save Mitchell Cook and the others, he needed Kevin's help. What did you say? When did this happen? Kevin asked in shock. An hour or two ago. They're taking them to the Williams mansion in New York, Drake answered worriedly. All right. I got it. Take care of yourself and leave the rest to me, Kevin said as he hung up the phone. Kevin, what's wrong? Dalton asked in confusion. He could tell that the call had upset Kevin. Dalton, do me a favor. Call some of your men and come with me. Kevin's expression was especially grim as he tried to figure out what to do. The Williams family had actually dared to come to Chicago to abduct Kevin's friends and colleagues. If they could do that, would his parents still be safe in New York City? While Kevin was worrying about this, dozens of members of the Williams family were gathered together in the family mansion near New York City. Randall Williams, the family patriarch, was sitting in an armchair holding his hand-carved walking stick, the one that he liked to bang on the floor or a table to get everyone's attention. Cook, Adriana, Gilbert, and Emo were tied up and sitting on a bench along with Kevin's parents, Alan and Susan. Several of the younger members of the family were standing over them, ready to follow Thomas's orders as soon as he decided what punishment to inflict on them. Alan, Susan, you haven't taught your son very well, Thomas sneered. You've indulged Kevin and now he's offended the family one time too many. According to our family customs, his associates will be horsewhipped 40 times each if Kevin doesn't show his face here. If he does dare to return, he will be whipped twice as many times as a warning to anyone who would dare to oppose the family in the future, and you will also be punished for helping him. You don't know what you're talking about. My son didn't do anything wrong, Alan spat out, his eyes filled with determination. Oh, really? Big brother, do you have any idea how arrogant your son is? Father only wanted to teach him a lesson, but he fought back, causing the family to suffer heavy losses, and he will pay for what he's done. Thomas raged. Kevin's parents were terrified. They had no idea where their son was, or if he could get there in time. Kevin rushed out of Norman Steele's birthday party as soon as he got the call from Drake telling him that Cook and his other friends had been abducted by the Williams family. He asked Dalton to get some of his bodyguards and go along with him to New York. The scene at the Williams mansion was starting to get violent. Some of the younger Williams men were threatening their captives. One of them was ordered by Thomas to punch Alan in the face to get him to betray his son. You're talking nonsense. I believe in Kevin. Alan moaned as he endured the pain. He would never do anything to hurt the family. Still not willing to admit it, hit him again. Harder, Thomas shouted. After a couple of minutes of this, Alan's nose and mouth were bleeding and his eye started to swell up. And Susan wasn't spared from this either. Thomas ordered one of his nieces to slap her on the cheek to see if that would help change Alan's mind. Even though things had gotten bloody, Grandpa Williams just sat calmly in his chair, showing no sign of stopping the beating. Susan and Alan weren't strong enough to take any more of this. On top of that, Alan was still recovering from his heart attack, so he was close to his limit. Whenever one of them passed out, someone threw a bucket of ice water on them to wake them up. Just then, the mansion's front doors suddenly burst open. The solid wooden door was splintered by the powerful kick. Kevin's eyes turned blood red when he saw what they were doing to his parents and friends. He shouted fiercely, "What the hell are you doing?" "Kevin, how dare you come back here, you piece of shit!" Ethan yelled as he punched Kevin's father in the stomach. Alan was on the verge of collapse. "Stop it now!" Kevin shouted as he rushed towards his cousin. Kevin's hand was a blur as he reached out to grab Ethan by the throat. "Why don't you try hitting me instead?" Kevin said as he slapped Ethan's face viciously. When Ethan let out a muffled moan, Kevin punched him in the abdomen, doubling him over and knocking him to the ground. "Answer me. Which hand did you use to hit my father?" Kevin asked angrily. You piece of crap. How dare you hit me?" Ethan groaned in pain. Kevin ignored Ethan's complaint and grabbed his right hand. Everyone could clearly hear the crisp sound of bones breaking and Ethan's excruciating wail. "Kevin, you've broken my hand!" The intense pain made Ethan short of breath as he tried to keep himself from crying. With a ferocious look on his face, Kevin kicked Ethan in the ribs, breaking 3 of them and sending him flying 10 feet away. As Ethan landed, he took down a few of the other Williams men along the way. "Mom, Dad, are you okay?" Kevin asked as he untied their hands and hugged them tightly. Susan fainted immediately and Alan looked at his son and whispered, "Kevin, tell me, did you do anything to hurt the family?" "No, Dad. I've never done anything to provoke the family. Whatever I did, they're the ones who forced me to do it." Kevin answered anxiously as tears fell from his eyes. "Good, son. That's enough for me," Alan said faintly before he passed out. Kevin couldn't tell if his father was alive or dead. "Dad! Mom!" Kevin shouted loudly as he shook his parents, but neither of them woke up. "What are you shouting about? Your parents failed to teach you how to show loyalty to the family," his Aunt Laura said bitterly. "They deserve to be punished for that, even if it means their death." Laura gave him a cruel glare. After handing Ethan over to one of her other relatives, she slowly walked up to Kevin and looked him straight in the eye. "What did you just say?" Kevin snarled back. "I said your parents deserve to die, and as for you, you bastard, how dare you show such disrespect to your grandfather? Do you really think you can get away with this without being punished?" Laura chided him. Kevin gently lowered his parents to the floor. After wiping the tears off his face, he stood up and walked towards Laura. What do you want?" Laura snarled at him. "Let me tell you something. This is the Williams family. If you aren't with us, you're against us, and you are nothing to us." "Nothing, huh?" Kevin suddenly moved toward her and took her by the arm. He dragged her over to his uncle and growled, "I'm sure the Williams family would be a lot better off without you." Laura was so upset and frightened that she fainted. Thomas caught his wife and sat her down in the chair. "Kevin, how dare you hurt my wife?" Thomas shrieked savagely as he rushed towards Kevin. "Shut up!" Kevin shouted as he slapped his uncle right in the face. It was more of a punch than a slap, and it spun Thomas around as he fell to the ground. His head was buzzing. Then Kevin grabbed his uncle by the throat and said coldly, "Today, right in front of Grandpa and all these witnesses, let me ask you something. 3 years ago, when I bought the shares of Orion Group, all the money I spent was earned through my own hard work. Did I take even a penny from the family? Then you took Laura's advice and kicked me and my parents out of the family without any investigation at all. Did you tell Grandpa about any of that?" Kevin continued, "Under Ethan and Laura's crappy management, Williams Media was left an empty shell. If you hadn't given it to me in exchange for my financial help, I'm sure it would have gone bankrupt. Then you took the Williams family's money and joined forces with outside families to attack Williams Media and drive down its stock so that I wouldn't be able to recover from the losses." Everyone remained silent as Kevin continued to lay out the facts in front of Randall Williams and the rest of the family. "Did you notice that, even though I said I was going to take back the $3 billion that I lent the family, did I actually come back and demand it?" "No," Kevin asked coldly. "But what about you guys? What did you do to me every time that you saw me? Other than insulting me, what else have you done?" Kevin slapped Thomas hard in the face and added, "I'm so much stronger than your worthless son. And another thing, my father, your actual brother, how could you have him beaten to death?" Kevin threw Thomas into the crowd as soon as he was finished speaking. "How dare you?" Grandpa Williams snapped as he banged his walking stick on the floor. He was furious. "How dare I? Grandpa, let me ask you a question. You said that I offended the family, but when did I do anything like that on purpose?" Kevin replied without the slightest bit of fear. When he heard this, Grandpa Williams got choked up and couldn't say anything in response. With the help of two of his family members, Thomas stood up shakily and said, "Kevin, no matter what you say, you won't be able to walk out of here on your own. Listen up, everyone. Take this son of a bitch and punish him the way we always deal with traitors to the family." A group of men started walking towards Kevin with hideous expressions on their faces. "What now? Do you need help to bully me because you can't do it yourself?" Kevin roared before he shouted to the men who were waiting for him outside. "Dalton, what are you waiting for? Do you want to let me have all the fun?" As soon as he sent this, Dalton rushed headlong through the demolished front door. He was leading more than a dozen imposing-looking men. "Who the hell are you? How dare you enter our home?" Thomas shouted at the top of his lungs. "So you're the Williams family," Dalton shouted mockingly. "Kevin is like a brother to me. I can't let you treat him like this. And to answer your question, my name is Dalton Steele." "You're from the Steele family?" Thomas asked in shock. "Dalton, let's not waste any more time," Kevin said to his friend. "Get my parents and the others to the hospital." They were all in bad shape and Kevin was anxious to get them medical help. Grandpa William stepped out in front of everyone holding his walking stick. He looked very strong for his advanced age as he warned them. "First, you need to go through me." Dalton Steele's expression instantly became serious when he saw this. Looking very confident, Grandpa William said, "Young man, out of respect for your grandfather, Norman Steele, I'll forgive your youthful exuberance. Just go back to Chicago while you still can. Remember, we aren't afraid of your family and we won't allow you to come in here making demands." Dalton recovered from his initial surprise and repeated, "Sir, I'll say it again. Kevin is my brother." Then he turned his head and said to the men who were standing next to him, "Quick, go and help the others." "Have it your way, you arrogant fool," Grandpa William said as he raised his walking stick and swung it at Dalton's head. But he was caught before it reached its target. "Grandpa, I hate to contradict you, but I can't let you make a mistake like this," Kevin said very confidently. He remembered fondly how much love his grandfather had shown him when he was a child. so Kevin didn't want to fight with him unless it was absolutely necessary. But he was starting to look like he might have to do battle with Grandpa Williams anyway. Kevin asked Dalton to help his parents get medical help while he faced his grandfather in front of the whole family. He didn't want to fight him, but it looked like he had to. So he warned Grandpa Williams not to start a battle with his friend Dalton Steele. Hearing Kevin talk to him like this, Grandpa Williams was stunned for a moment, but he quickly recovered. Then he swung his walking stick around in a big circle, forcing Kevin, Dalton, and the others to take 4 or 5 steps back. "As long as I have anything to do with it, you won't be able to leave today," Grandpa Williams said as he held his lion-headed walking stick and banged it on the ground forcefully. Several of the floor tiles cracked from the violent blows. "Grandpa, remember you're starting this, not me," Kevin said confidently. "You really don't know what's good for you, do you?" Grandpa Williams shouted. Then he turned around and yelled, "Everyone retreat!" Hearing this, the group of attackers from the Williams family all took 5 or 6 steps back. Kevin could tell that his grandfather still had a lot of skills. After all, he had spent his entire youth training in the martial arts. Kevin wasn't looking forward to this match. However, for the sake of his parents and friends, he had no choice but to fight. "Grandpa, I'm sorry I have to do this," Kevin said very sincerely. Grandpa Williams waved his walking stick around threateningly and replied, "We haven't seen each other in a few years. I want to see if you can bag up your arrogant attitude." "Dalton, get my parent out of here," Kevin shouted at his friend. Then he took a deep breath and rushed at his grandfather. The moment Kevin moved, there was a loud shout that shook the entire mansion. "Come on, focus," Kevin muttered to himself. It was astounding how much he had recovered from the injuries he'd received in the past couple of days. "Well done," Grandpa Williams said as he moved forward to meet Kevin's attack. The two of them collided explosively. "Everyone, follow me," Dalton shouted as the fight moved into the mansion's courtyard. "If anyone attacks us, fight back with all that you have." "Chase them all out," Thomas roared as they got closer. Soon, the Williams family and Steele's people started fighting with each other. At the same time, Grandpa Williams lifted his walking stick and brought it down in a powerful overhead strike. It just missed Kevin's body and smashed into the ground, breaking several marble paving stones. "Grandfather, please don't make me hurt you," Kevin said as he gritted his teeth and took 2 steps back. Then he threw himself at Grandpa Williams again. "Kevin's very good, but he doesn't know his own limitations yet," Grandpa Williams said to himself. Then he swung his stick around and around in circles, trying to strike his grandson. Kevin caught the lion's head carving on the end of the walking stick, but not before Grandpa Williams had struck several of his own family members, knocking them to the ground one after another. Kevin took a couple of steps back. After he had regained his balance, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Grandpa Williams also took a few steps back and his face turned pale. "Kevin, are you all right?" Dalton asked with concern as he cradled Kevin's father in his arms. "Don't worry about me. Just get my father and the others to the hospital," Kevin said right away. "Kevin, I really underestimated you," Grandpa Williams commented as he looked around the courtyard. The Williams family's best fighters had been beaten up badly by Dalton and his bodyguards. Some of them were lying on the ground, screaming in agony from various painful injuries. "I never thought that my grandfather could still fight so well," Kevin said with a solemn expression on his face. "You shouldn't be so brash. The family is doing this for your own good," Grandpa Williams said bluntly. "The family? Ha!" Kevin sneered as he looked at everyone. "I swear to you, if my father doesn't survive, if anything happens to him, I will bury the entire Williams family with him." Grandpa Williams became livid when he heard this. "Ridiculous! Just because I can't defeat you? I admit that I'm not a match for you, grandfather, but can you guarantee that you'll be able to protect the Williams family forever? Will these people ever be able to step outside of their homes?" Kevin said threateningly. "You How dare you talk to me like this? Grandpa William snarled as he held his walking stick tightly. He was so furious that his chest was heaving. That's all I've got to say. Whether you will be able to protect them or not, only time will tell. After saying this, Kevin turned around and left. Grandpa William stared at the mansion's smashed front door. It suddenly occurred to him that there was something suspicious about all of this. "Father, are you all right?" Thomas asked as his cousins helped him walk over to Grandpa Williams. "Kevin has committed a heinous crime. How dare he attack you, Father?" Laura, who had just woken up, said with hatred in her eyes. "And that Dalton Steele. He came here to interfere in our family's business because he thinks the Steeles can protect him. He's even injured some of us. We can't let him get away with this." "Grandfather, 15 of us need to go to the hospital immediately. There are also a dozen or so who are seriously injured," Ethan said angrily. "This Kevin is really detestable. He actually joined forces with outsiders and came to cause trouble here in our family." "Then get them to the hospital," Grandpa William said calmly. Then he turned to Thomas and said, "Come with me." While this was going on, Kevin had already arrived at Philip Quinn's private hospital. Under Dr. Willow's skilled care, Alan and the others quickly received the medical attention they needed. After everything that had just happened, Kevin didn't want to leave his parent in New York, so he arranged for them to be transferred to a hospital in Chicago once their injuries had been treated. Then he made plans to head back to Chicago himself, accompanied by Dalton and his bodyguards. What Kevin didn't expect was that Dr. Willow would actually follow them back to Chicago and even use her connections to take charge of Alan and Susan's treatment. After making all the arrangements, Kevin called Lily to let her know what had been going on and that he was heading home. A few hours later, Lily and her mother walked into the hospital where Kevin's parents had been transferred, downtown General. Dorothy said unhappily, "Lily, if you wanted to see Kevin's parents, why did you have to drag me along? I already told my friends that I'd play cards with them later." "Mom, some things are more important than playing cards," Lily said helplessly. "After all, they aren't dying. How are we going to help?" Dorothy complained. "Mom, what are you saying? Kevin and I have been married for almost 3 years, but we've never met his parents. Now that the two of them are in the hospital, we really should visit them. It's the humane thing to do," Lily said assertively. "I really don't know what you see in that good-for-nothing," Dorothy whined as she reluctantly entered the elevator. "Mom, I wish you'd give Kevin a chance. He's doing really well now, and I'm sure he'll be making a good salary soon," Lily pleaded with her mother. The way Lily saw it, now that she had accepted Kevin, she should do something to help his parents. Okay, I'll try. But let me set some ground rules. I'm only staying for a few minutes," Dorothy said obstinately. Then she warned Lily, "You'd better not stay too long. If you spend too much time with people like them, you may pick up some bad habits." Just as she was saying this, the two of them arrived in Ellen and Susan's wing of the hospital. But they were stopped by 2 men. "I'm sorry, but no one is allowed to enter this area," one of the men told them. Dorothy was stunned when she heard this and thought that maybe she and Lily had taken a wrong turn. Based on the looks of the 2 bodyguards, she figured that they were protecting someone very important. Just then, Dr. Willow walked over wearing her white lab coat, her stethoscope dangling casually around her neck. "What's going on?" Dr. Willow asked the guards as she looked at Lily and Dorothy. "Dr. Willow, these 2 people want to enter the room," one of them answered very respectfully. "Oh, are you Kevin's friends?" Dr. Willow asked curiously. "He's my husband," Lily answered awkwardly. "Is that so? Then please come in." Dr. Willow smiled and invited the 2 of them into the room. When they walked in, Ellen was lying on the hospital bed wrapped in bandages. His wife Susan was in the other hospital bed. "Ellen, Susan, you have some visitors," Dr. Willow said very gently. Lily and Dorothy looked around the room, unsure of what to say next. Now that Kevin's parents had been transferred to downtown General in Chicago, Lily went to visit them with her mother Dorothy. She was a little nervous because in the 3 years that Lily had been married to Kevin, she had never met his parents. Dr. Willow led them into the room and told Alan and Susan that they had visitors. When he heard Dr. Willow, Kevin slowly opened his eyes and got up from the couch where he'd been resting. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Kevin asked happily. "Can't I come visit your parents?" Lily replied as she gave Dr. Willow a suspicious glance. "Let me introduce you to everyone," Kevin said with a smile. "This is my father, Alan, and this is my mother, Susan, and this is Dr. Willow, the director of the hospital in New York that first treated them. Thanks to her, my parents are doing fine now." Lily didn't seem very excited. She greeted Kevin's parents and then turned around and asked Kevin jealously, "Hospital director? From New York? What's she doing here?" "It's like this, Dr. Willow, Kevin trying to explain. "Really, Kevin, this is unbelievable. You were gone for just a couple of days and brought back some other woman?" Dorothy interrupted Kevin rudely. "You haven't changed at all. Still trash." "That's not what's going on at all. You've misunderstood," Dr. Willow quickly tried to explain. "Please don't try to explain," Dorothy said bluntly. "You've been caught red-handed. There's nothing more to say." Then she continued in a nasty tone of voice. "Who would believe that the director of a hospital in New York would come all the way to Chicago just for a scumbag like you? If you're going to lie, at least come up with something believable." "You—" Dr. Willow tried to reply, but she was caught off guard by Dorothy's harsh accusations. She stood there blushing, trying to find a way to set things straight. Susan sat up in her hospital bed and tried to explain. "You've really misunderstood. We just got here from New York after a horrible experience that almost killed my husband. Kevin and Fifi are just very good friends. She's really helped us a lot." "Fifi? I'm ashamed of you, Kevin," Dorothy scoffed. "Lily, this is all a huge misunderstanding," Kevin said helplessly. But Dorothy spoke first. "I'm not surprised that things have come to this, and it's not a misunderstanding. Kevin, you've been freeloading in our house for 3 years. At first I thought that no matter how useless you are, at least you were honest. As long as you treated Livy well, I was willing to look the other way. But I really didn't expect you to cheat on my daughter with some little tramp that you picked up in New York." Dorothy continued very harshly. "Well, that's fine with me. Anyway, it looks like your parents are like this tramp, so now you can go ahead and finally divorce Lily. I'm sure I can find a good husband for her." This made Alan so angry that his heart monitor started beeping wildly. "Dad, are you all right?" Kevin asked nervously as he walked over to his father. "What are you shouting for? He's still alive. Don't try to change the topic," Dorothy said callously. Kevin suddenly snapped his head around and glared at Dorothy fiercely. He shouted loudly, "What the hell is wrong with you? Don't you ever think before you speak? How dare you talk to me like that, you piece of trash?" Dorothy retorted angrily. "You go out and cheat on your wife and then you don't have the guts to admit it? What kind of man are you?" Kevin opened his mouth to try to respond to Dorothy's accusations, but she just interrupted him and kept on yelling. Then she spoke to Ellen and Susan as she pointed accusingly at Kevin. "This son of yours isn't only incompetent, but he also loves to embarrass my family and draw attention to himself wherever he goes. I really don't know what kind of a hussy would fall for him. If I had a son like him, I'd die of embarrassment." She was furious and didn't care how much she was upsetting the 2 hospital patients. Kevin finally couldn't hold it in anymore and he sharply told her to shut up. He was afraid that Dorothy's tirade would make his parents angry and that wouldn't be good for them in their condition. "Why should I shut up? Did I say something wrong?" Dorothy snapped back as she put her hands on her hips. "Please don't upset Mr. and Mrs. Williams anymore. They need to rest now," Dr. Willow said calmly. Because of her training, she managed to keep a cool head even though Dorothy was making her quite angry. "Since when did a tramp like you earn the right to speak here?" Dorothy said as she walked up to Dr. Willow and raised her hand like she was going to slap her. but Kevin grabbed her wrist to stop her. Seeing all of this made Lily feel very downhearted. "If you continue to behave like this, don't blame me for being rude to you," Kevin said harshly. The entire room suddenly became quiet and Dorothy looked at Kevin in shock. She never thought he would be so assertive with her. Lily took a deep breath and asked hesitantly, "Kevin, what do you want to do? Are you going to hit my mother?" "You don't believe me either?" Kevin asked Lily sorrowfully. "I can only believe what I see," Lily said without changing her expression. Kevin slowly let go of Dorothy's wrist and stepped back. Then he let out a long sigh and looked Dorothy in the eyes. "Please, leave. Don't come back and disturb my parents like this again." "Do you really think I want to stay here? I don't want to spend another minute with scum like you," Dorothy muttered. "Your parents should be ashamed of you." "Get lost," Kevin roared as he bumped into a shelf and knocked a fruit basket onto the floor. The two guards at the door immediately rushed in and looked at Lily and Dorothy suspiciously. "Come on, Lily, let's go." Dorothy scowled as she pulled her daughter by the arm and quickly left the room. After a long pause, Kevin gestured to the two guards that it was okay for them to leave. "Mr. Williams, are you all right?" Dr. Willow asked guiltily. "I'm sorry about this. If it wasn't for me, this wouldn't have happened." Dr. Willow was grateful to Kevin for all the help he'd given her. If it wasn't for him, she was afraid that she would have spent the rest of her life as an ordinary doctor and not a hospital director. But if Kevin ended up getting a divorce because of her, Dr. Willow could never forgive herself. "It's not your fault. Go ahead and check on my parents. After you're done, we can go out to eat," Kevin offered as he forced a smile. Since Lily already didn't believe him, Kevin figured it couldn't make things any worse to go out to dinner with Dr. Willow. "I'll take good care of your parents, but I'm not that hungry right now," Dr. Willow said shyly. "That's okay, but I really would like to thank you," Kevin said calmly. Then he turned serious and told her, "It might be hard on you over the next few days. Please, take care of them." Then he remembered how his parents had ended up in the hospital in the first place, and he felt very disappointed to be a member of the Williams family. As Lily and Dorothy were walking out of the hospital, they received a call from Grandma Jones, saying that there was an urgent matter that she wanted to discuss. The two of them called for a ride and quickly headed to the Jones family mansion. When Grandma Jones saw Lily walking in the room, she stood up from her chair. "Grandma, what happened?" Lily asked in puzzlement. "Actually, there's nothing urgent," her grandmother replied. "Grandma, why are you still talking to her?" Jason suddenly interrupted. Then Jason turned to Lily and said to her, "Let me tell you what happened. Last month, the Jones family's financial record showed that," and then he paused for a moment. "The family's total income is decreased by almost 30%. What's the use of having so many shares? Has it gone down that much? How is that possible?" Lily asked in shock. "What are you pretending for? The accounting department also said that the money we lost was transferred to the import-export company that Tyler Dong gave you." Jason sneered and then he said, "Lily, how could you do such a thing? Are you trying to pocket all of our family's money?" "That's impossible," Lily stammered. "I've never let the people from the import-export company interact with anyone from our family." Then Lily realized that although she had control of the company Tyler had given her, she didn't know everyone the Jones family had running their businesses. Something didn't add up. "Just look for yourself," Jason said as he threw a stack of financial statements onto the floor. Suddenly, Grandma Jones let out a long sigh. "Lily, it looks like you're still too young to be in such an important position. You don't have enough experience yet. Although you didn't let the companies interact with each other, can you guarantee that they didn't do it privately?" Lily didn't know what to say. "Lily, take my advice. Return your shares to the family, and then go back to your old position with us and get more experience," Grandma Jones said as she deliberately looked over at Jason. The corners of her mouth turned up into a villainous smile. It looked like she'd be able to get her company shares back after all. After Lily and Dorothy left Kevin and his parents at the hospital, they got a call telling them that they needed to go see Grandma Jones. When Lily got to the family mansion, Jason informed her that the family's money had been funneled into the import-export company that Tyler Dawn had given her. Now, Grandma wanted her to give up her shares in the family business. "Grandma, do you really want me to hand over my shares that badly?" Lily asked hesitantly. This news had really upset her. "Lily, I don't want your shares for myself. I only want you to return them for the sake of the entire family. Then I guess you don't want to see the Jones family succeed, do you?" her grandmother gently advised her. "Face it, you aren't the best of our family's younger generation. Don't let your thirst for power bury the rest of the family," Grandma Jones said sternly. "Why don't you just transfer some of the shares and then set up a board of directors for the family? This might seem like a step down, but you would still control the board's leadership. At the same time, you could also get more experience. What do you think?" This plan got Jason very excited. He knew that Lily would no longer control the Jones family's affairs as soon as she handed over her shares. Lily was silent for a long moment as she considered her options. Finally, she let out a long sigh and nodded gently. She knew very well that it was only because of Tyler Dawn's help that she had found herself in the top position in the Jones family. But this wasn't enough to get her relatives to listen to her. "Do you agree?" Grandma Jones asked happily. "I'll do as you say, Grandma. In any case, I don't seem to have any choice," Lily said in a low voice. "Okay, Lily, I'm glad I haven't misjudged you," Grandma Jones said cheerfully. "We've already drawn up the necessary documents. You can lug them over before you sign." As soon as she said that, the Jones family's accountant and attorneys immediately took out several documents for Lily to sign. The next 5 days passed by very quickly. After his parent had recovered from their injuries, Kevin decided to return to Williams Media to see how things were going. "Kevin, I'm really sorry about this. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be riding a scooter right now," Dr. Willow said apologetically. At the moment, she had her arms wrapped around Kevin's waist as she sat on the rear seat of the little moped. "That's okay. Anyway, I'm used to getting around on a scooter," Kevin said casually as he weaved through traffic on the way to his office building. The two of them seemed to be drawing a bit of attention from passerbys. They looked a little too old to be riding around the city on a little scooter, and Kevin felt slightly self-conscious about it. It all had started 2 days ago when Kevin headed out with Dr. Willow to buy some clothes for his parents. Dr. Willow mentioned that she was planning to buy a car, but since she got her driver's license, she hadn't practiced much, which made her a little anxious. So Kevin decided to help her out by finding an empty parking lot so she could practice driving without any traffic. Then he gave her the key to his Pagani Roadster and let her get behind the wheel. Unfortunately, she drove the car right into a light pole and then another one. The car was still at the body shop and Kevin had no idea when he'd get it back. So he decided to ride his scooter for a while just for fun instead of taking one of his other cars. They soon arrived in the Williams Media parking garage. "Wow, Kevin, is that person over there Brittany Davis? I really like to listen to her music. I sure didn't expect to see her here in person today," Dr. Willow said excitedly. "Do you really like her? Would you like her autograph?" Kevin asked her. There had been a lot of changes at Williams Media lately. For some unknown reason, a few of their clients had suddenly canceled their contracts and the company had suffered huge losses from it. That was why Kevin had decided to stop by and find out exactly what had happened. But right after Kevin parked his scooter and he and Dr. Willow got off, a black car suddenly crashed into it, almost demolishing the little bike. "Why do so many people crash into scooters in this garage?" Kevin thought to himself. Soon, a young man in a business suit and shiny leather shoes quickly jumped out of the car. He looked at the big dent in his fender and got very upset. "What's wrong with you? Why did you park a scooter in this garage? Do you realize how much this car costs me? Now this is going to cost you," the man shouted at Kevin. Are you kidding? You're the one who hit us. Don't turn this around and make it look like it's our fault, Dr. Willow told them. She didn't show any fear as she stood up for Kevin. When the man saw Dr. Willow, he was speechless. She was very beautiful, and the way she was dressed, she could have been one of the celebrity clients of William's media. "Hi there," the man said as he tried to charm her. "Were you riding on this little scooter?" Just then, a young woman in her mid-30s stepped out of the car. "Logan, how is the car? Is everything all right?" Kevin was stunned when he saw the woman. It was actually his college advisor, Professor Charity Boyer. "Kevin, what are you doing here?" Charity asked with a surprised look on her face. "Do you work for Williams Media?" "I'm just hanging around," Kevin replied. The driver, whose name was Logan Morgan, said with a sneer, "You must be mistaken, Miss Boyer. The way this guy is dressed, do you really think he works here?" Charity suddenly sighed when she heard that. Tucker had mentioned to her that after Kevin graduated, he ended up drifting around. He even went to freeload off his in-laws, and he had turned into a real loser. "Kevin, I told you when you were in school, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Don't expect everything to just fall into your lap." "But it sounds like you didn't take my words to heart," Charity said very seriously. "Take a look at what Brittany is doing. She was also one of my students, and now her career is taking off. And Tucker is currently the manager of a large company. How did you end up like this?" She kept scolding him. "So you were one of Miss Boyer's students?" Morgan asked Kevin. Then he thought for a moment and said, "For her sake, I won't argue with you about this. Just pay me $10,000 and we'll call it good." "You are being very unreasonable," Dr. Willow replied, sounding very unconvinced. "Not to mention that you were the one who hit us. And let's talk about your car. It can't be worth more than $40,000. Do you really think this little dent will cost $10,000 to fix? You're just being greedy." "Kevin, is this young woman your wife?" Charity asked curiously as she looked at Dr. Willow. The question made Dr. Willow suddenly feel very self-conscious. "No, please, don't misunderstand. Mr. Williams and I are only friends." "Wow, Kevin, things must be pretty miserable for you. Even your own wife isn't willing to admit that she knows you," Charity said regretfully. "I also told you that a person needs to have some ambition. But did you listen to me? Just look at you now. This is the result of your lack of motivation." Charity's face showed her disappointment as she said this. "Professor Boyer, we aren't in school right now. Why do you feel like you need to teach me a lesson?" Kevin asked with a faint smile. "Stop slacking off. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Even when one of my students graduate, I still feel responsible for them. Seeing how you are now, I feel ashamed for you," Charity said coldly. She continued to scold him relentlessly. "When you see how well your classmates are doing, doesn't that have any effect on you? Are you really happy to be mooching off your in-laws?" When Kevin heard this, all he could do was shake his head. He still hadn't gotten over the big scene that Dorothy made in his parents' hospital room, nor the fact that Lily still didn't trust him. Kevin had completely given up on the Jones family and was determined to never go back to them. "All right, if you don't want to listen to me, then I have nothing more to say to you. You have to live your own life," Charity Boyer sighed in disappointment. "If you damaged Morgan's car, then you need to find a way to fix it for him." "What Miss Boyer said just makes a lot of sense. Listen, even though my car isn't expensive, it's brand new," Morgan sneered. Then he added, "And don't you know you can't park scooters in a parking space that's reserved for cars?" "Did you just make up this rule?" Kevin almost laughed out loud when he heard him say that. "I'm sure you're jealous of people who can own real cars, but that's just the way things are," Morgan said mockingly. What more could Kevin say to someone like this?